Hey everyone, welcome in. We're just gonna give people a couple minutes to arrive. While we are waiting for people to come in, if anyone wants to just open up the Q&A panel and put in one question to make sure it's working, feel free to ask questions throughout there. Anata, who I think most of you know, will be here as well, helping moderate. And if you have a question, make sure it gets answered. And then a little later on, Denzel, one of our engineers, will also be joining. Thank you, Dean. The question is there.
Awesome. Want to wait for a couple of minutes, Ethan, before we get started?
Yeah, we'll just give people a little bit to arrive.
Yeah. See who's here. There's so many familiar faces. Yes.
It's kind of it's fun knowing that there's people here, even though it's just us on video. So thank you everyone for joining, having some excitement to learn a little bit more about our agent and how it can be implemented.
Yep, we can actually get started with intros while people continue to join. And I'll give you a quick overview of what the session's going to look like. But hey, everyone, I'm Anahata. Looking from the list of attendees, I can't see you guys, but I'm pretty sure we've crossed paths at some point or another. I'm Chief of Staff here at Mintlify and primarily work on the post-sales side of things. Ethan, who's also with us today, is our head of technical writing and most definitely everything and our go-to resource for everything related to docs. The goal of today's webinar specifically is just walk you through the agent. A lot of you were sent this RSVP because we noticed you had the agent turned on, but you were kind of using it and kind of not. And so we just wanted to walk you through how to use the agent, show you a couple of different ways on how to use it, some of our use cases. And then we also ran a very quick survey during the RSVP on what like sort of external tooling or workflow would you like to see in tandem with the agent, and all of you almost unanimously voted for GitHub Action. Ethan very kindly put together that template today, so we'll be walking through that as well. Closer to about 1:20, we'll break into Q&A. Dean very kindly from our team tested the Q&A feature out, so we should be good there. And we'll also have Denzel, who actually shipped the agent product itself, join us for that Q&A so he can answer any questions, hear directly from you guys versus us being like the middleman for no good reason. But with that, I'm gonna pass over the mic to Ethan to kind of like get started only because we're very short on time and we want to make this as productive as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Ananta. Like you mentioned, I'm Ethan. I've chatted with some of you before, recognize some people from technical writing communities as well. So it's great to see you here. I'm going to be talking about some of the different workflows and use cases for the agent. Everything I'm talking about should have documentation already on the Mentlify docs. If we end up discussing something in the Q&A section that doesn't, please, you can find me on Slack and Mentlify or LinkedIn or email. I'm happy to chat about any of this more, and we'll share some resources as well. So if we were all here together, this is where I'd like ask, like, raise your hand if you've used the agent or you have a preferred way to work through it. But I'm just going to share a couple. So one of the quickest ways to get most of your team access to the agent is with our Slack integration. So this is great when you want to democratize the contributions and who is using it, because the agent, in its name, it can help generate documentation, whether it's a like identify a typo or get something off the ground. I find it's really helpful for people on the Mintlify team who might have just shipped a feature, but they are not an expert in documentation. So putting together a full draft is a little intimidating. They can use the agent to get started, and then I will come in and take the PR over the finish line. Or if it's like a really large update, which is what I'm going to share. Personally, when you have to make a just like a naming change that affects a lot of files, you could use variables, reusable content to do that. But if you haven't set that up, like I haven't, because there's always more to be done. One thing you could do is a comment kind of like this, where I'm going to ask the agent. We're not actually doing this, by the way. We're not changing this name. This is just a demo. And just by mentioning it on Slack, the agent will respond with an emoji telling me it's looking at it. And then once it finishes running, it's going to open a pull request preview. You can have a dedicated channel like I'm doing here. You can see I'm in the Docs Updates channel. You could also chat directly with it. That's kind of how I encourage people to work if it can feel a little vulnerable, telling me like I'm working through this with um, the agent. But if we look at this past one I did, you can see that you can have threaded conversations. So uh, this is something else. It was a demo. We didn't actually do this, but I could iteratively ask the agent to do different edits. For example, use Mintlify components like accordions, and then it'll respond with the changes, a deployment, and then once you're happy with it, you'll move to GitHub, which I'll show you in a moment, and that'll be how we finish it. The agent will tell you what tasks it's working on. So if you're familiar with other agentic tools, whether you're using Cursor, Claude, ChatGPT, often when it's calling tools, it will tell you what it's doing. In this case, it has identified everywhere that we use the term preview deployments, and it is one by one updating them. Kind of like if I were to do a find and replace myself, but instead I can have this run in the background while I'm talking to you. For people to use the agent, they do need to be members of your Mintlify organization. So if you have people on your team in your Slack workspace who aren't part of that, they will not have access to it unless they also are in your organization. We can give this one more moment before it opens the PR, and I can no longer see the Q&A panel in Ananta. So if there are questions, if you could just let me know.
I see a question here. Have you integrated the agent with Asana or another project management tool? We have not just yet, but Denzel's going to be on the Q&A session shortly as well. And I can tell you that we're looking to build integrations with Linear as well as like a few other tools. I don't have like specifics on timeline, but we're excited about building out like easier ways to integrate with other tools as well. And more feedback like this will allow us to build a greater case internally as well to build it. So thanks, Bianca.
Yeah, and for all the Microsoft Teams users out there, we are aware this currently doesn't have a Teams integration, but that would also be something that we hope to get to. All right, so it finished its task. So it is now opening a PR in the background on GitHub. And once that finishes, yep, we can now click this and we will go to GitHub. And we can see that, so it opens all PRs in a draft, partially to reduce noise if you have any workflow set up that notify you, whether it's on GitHub, in Linear, on Slack, wherever you're working, just so that it doesn't immediately alert everyone. It gives you a summary, lets you know what happened, and then if we go to files changed, we can review it as if it were a PR opened by anyone else. I can see here, so I found deployments, changed to environments like I asked. I can see that it also had to rename a whole file, so it accomplished that as well. After this, I'm going to close this because, like I mentioned, we are not making this change. But if you were ready to incorporate this, you could move it to ready for review, out of draft, and then approve and merge, or whatever your process is for maintaining contributions. If you didn't want it, you could just close it, delete the branch, or you could go back to the agent and make an update. So in this case, I could say, actually, we're not going to call it that and give it a different name, and it would make the same edit again. Also, once Mintlify finishes generating a preview, if you have preview environments as part of your plan, I will update this with a link to that. So this is one way that you can engage with it. You can also automate the agent using the API. So you can do this. I'm going to show you a GitHub Actions workflow, but you could use whatever automation tool you prefer. If it's N8N, Zapier, you could use Gumloop. But I'm going to show you an action. So this is one of my test orgs where I have information about varieties of mint, and I have the markdown for this page here. I'm going to edit it. And in this repository, I have a GitHub action that listens for any changes and then will open a pull request in the documentation repository associated with this. So I'm going to Oh, sorry, I'm actually going to edit this one where I have my varieties of mint. So this is the source file. I'm going to go here, what a bottom one. I'm going to commit this directly to main. Normally, I encourage everyone to work with branches. And now if we go to actions, we can see that it is currently running this workflow, which is my update docs workflow. It will take about a minute, maybe 2 minutes to run, but currently what it's doing is it is in my documentation repository where my test environment is built from. That gives you the site. It is going to open a pull request here, again, as a draft once it's finished. The example code for setting up the workflow is in our documentation, so it'll be one of the things we share with you after. And you can copy it as is, and it will listen to any changes to the repository that occur and then open it in the documentation repository. I wouldn't necessarily encourage this setup for a more complex environment because it's helpful to still like you might not want every single change to be documented, but if you have something where it's like an API that updates, then every change should flow into your documentation. You're good to go. I still recommend reviewing every PR. Don't fully automate this. Like there should be your human intuition. You know your users and their needs better than anyone else. And while you can get automated documentation updates, you should still make sure that they align to what you need your users to know and what's going to help them be most successful. Okay, so while this is running, are there any additional questions?
I don't see any in the chat so far, but would love if people had like thoughts and feedback around the agent as well, and like feel free to just drop it in there. This is just V1 of the agent. We're hoping to make this a lot more advanced and a lot more integrated with like a lot of other tooling. In my opinion, right now, and Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the biggest use case for the agent is especially for non-technical contributors to your docs who find it sometimes annoying to like use the web editor, or people who are just like, oh my God, there's like this tiny nit I have to fix across like 20 different files. This is incredibly helpful. And then I see two questions. One is from Nicholas, who's our customer at Proof. Does the workflow just work with GitHub, or can it be used to look at GitLab repos?
I believe it could work with GitLab. I've set it up on GitHub. It's using our assistant API endpoint. That itself is not limited to GitHub. However, this would be a good question for when Denzel joins us because I'm not sure if the GitHub app is a requirement.
Got it. I'll make note of that to bring up with Denzel again. And then David has another question. I think Ethan is hinting at the key concern I'm here to understand. What level of complexity changes should you delegate to the agent, and which ones should you implement yourself? And there's another upvote right next to it.
Yeah, so I think that is going to be a somewhat personal decision for your team. I'm going to start with like a slightly adjacent answer of you'll be more successful with using the agent if you focus on the outcome. So if you know what you want it to accomplish for you and you can tell the agent or other similar tools, I want docs that do like I want someone to know this at the end. That will always be more effective than just saying like make this better or document this feature. But I would say there isn't a like a threshold where it's too complex versus complex enough to account for. It's more, can you review the output and know that it is aligning to your standards? It is going to help your users be successful. So I think that gets more into the workflow in general, where inviting contributions from your whole team. If it's someone who might not know that, who might not be as familiar with how your docs are maintained, they might not know what the proper style is, they might not be familiar with the components, or they might not know exactly what the feature they're documenting is. I would say they probably shouldn't just fully automate it and expect to immediately merge that contribution. You would still want to review that as if it were any other contribution. But then if you yourself are an expert and you're very familiar with it, I think you can be quite successful with the tool, telling it what you want to achieve, reviewing it yourself and having documentation that works.
Yep. There we go. And Ethan, I think like anything else you wanted to demo before we launch into Q&A? Oh,
Yeah, I think we can move to the Q&A. I'm not going to show you the YAML file for the workflow since that's a little uh, static and you'll be able to read that afterward. But it is a very simple to implement workflow, so you can customize it for your repository setup. Also want to mention, like if you use a monorepo, it can also work in that instance as well.
got it. And then one more question from David and from Derek. And just a heads up that I have made a grave error in not making Denzel a panelist as part of this webinar. So Denzel, I know you're on this call. If you could type out answers or like while I'm reading them out. Oh, Denzel's here. Beautiful.
I allowed him to talk.
The first question from David again, what's the best way to ensure visual consistency across your docs when implementing changes with Mintlify agent? Is it an agents.md file or is there something else?
Yeah, I think part of that is I personally haven't tested with an ages.md file. That should work. I found that if you make sure that somewhere in your documentation mentions the Mintlify schema, which should be in your docs.json, it should, as far as visually understanding components and whatnot, um, it will know to use that schema. And that way, when you say visual consistency, I, I'm not sure if you mean like formatting text or adhering to like the way you write headings, or if it's something else. I'm sorry if I am misinterpreting this here, but having already consistent documentation as the context that the agent is building out future documentation on should help maintain consistency when you're using this agent is only trained on your documentation and will try to mimic what you've written rather than pulling from all over.
And I know, David, like if you have any clarifying questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat again in case we're not addressing what you're really asking. Moving on to the next one from Derek. I'm interested in the GitHub Actions. Is it possible for the agent to watch for changes in one package in a monorepo and update the docs in another package of the same monorepo in the same PR? Example, watch for changes in JS docs in a React library and update the relevant docs.
Hmm. That's one, Denzel. I want your opinion here because the same PR, I don't believe so. I think it'll have to make its own branch.
Yeah, if you use the if you use the GitHub action the way that Ethan set it up, it's more custom. So with the GitHub action, you can choose the branch specifically each and every time. So you can have it be more consistent that way. Currently, if you use it via Slack, you have to each Slack thread is a new branch and a new PR for the agent. But if you do it via API, it's possible.
Copy that. Moving on to Alice's question. For this GitHub action, any update made in the other repo, such as the dev repo, will trigger the workflow in the docs repo. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's how the our sample workflow is set up. So any change will then get reviewed. So if there weren't relevant docs changes based on it, it wouldn't update anything. But anything that does require an update to the documentation would be noticed and a PR would be opened.
Copy that. David added more context on what he meant by visual consistency from the previous question. When I say visual consistency, I mean like using the same components throughout. Like if you prefer tables over cards, will it make sure it remembers that context and like do it across the docs?
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, in that case, providing context for the agents of saying like use tables or prefer tables would be helpful. Um, I believe just from my experience using it, it is pretty consistent at matching your style and using what you already have. But if you wanted to make it more certain, yeah, setting up a file. And then Denzel, yeah, if you have any advice for configuring that as well.
Yeah, one thing you also could do is you can just like tell it to always read the agents.md file. That's the best way to do sub-prompting. It's easier than just like, manually typing it like each and every time if you have like a really big guideline.
And so, Denzel, does this mean that we could have an agents.md file live in the repo and the agent would use that as context every time they created a PR?
You have to make sure to like tell the agent to read that file, but yes.
Okay, so as long as I tell, hey, I'm Mintlify agent, please make sure you read the agents.md file. Can you do XYZ? And it'll follow the context.
Hmm.
Gotcha. Another one from David. Thank you, David, for holding down the fort. When prompting Mintlify agent in a thread, does Mintlify always create a new PR for each subsequent comment, or does it edit the original PR from the very first comment?
So whenever it's in a thread, if it's in the same thread, it would edit the PR. So it would make new commits for everything it does and it edits.
Got it. So basically, if we have like a very large like thread with the agents just continue to the agent will continue to work on the same PR over and over again. I I, I think that's all saying yes.
Hmm. Yep.
Yes.
Cool. Another question from Nicholas. Just wanted to resurface my conversation for Denzel. Thanks, Nicholas, for that reminder. My developers code in GitLab repos. Can the workflow listen to these GitLab repos and update my docs, which is housed in a separate GitHub docs repo?
If they're both connected to Mintlify, like if the docs repo is connected to Mintlify, you should be able to do that as well. You might have to change the action. The workflow isn't, I don't know if it's GitLab compatible, but it's pretty simple. It's just a single fetch request. So it can be adapted to work for GitLab as like a GitLab action. And then it will just edit a repository that Mintlify has access to.
Got it. And then Denzel, we would use the same like GitHub, the same agent API to build it out, right? The same way that Ethan did, but for GitLab.
The exact same agent API,
Got it.
exact same fetch request.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Any other questions that we can help with today? Just housekeeping rules. We'll be sharing this recording with everyone who RSVP'd for the event, and we'll also be uploading the webinar to our YouTube channel. So none of this context will be lost in case you guys need to revisit it. We have pretty detailed docs on both the agent and the GitHub workflow that Ethan has built. We also have another like docs workflow on the N8N workflow. So would encourage you to just like peruse our docs and explore the agent as much as you can. But happy to answer any more questions if you guys want, or we can give you back time, whichever one's the best. All right. There we go. Another question from David. I think you answered this already, but I want to make sure I understand. If my non-technical colleague is not listed as a member of the Mintlify organization, they would not be able to prompt Mintlify agent. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. They would need a seat in your Mintlify org. When you install it as a Slack app, and the first time someone goes to invoke it, they'll be prompted to authenticate.
That's mostly for like a security, any security concerns if you don't want people just opening or editing your code. Or you can also have it read code as well. So we just want to make sure that you can't like invoke it to read code that you don't allow.
That makes sense. Also, I know we have like another 7 minutes, but wondering, Denzel, if in the last 2 minutes you wouldn't mind like talking about where the agent is going. I know when we shipped the agent, it was sort of like a V1 with intentions to do a lot more. And I'm wondering like what's exciting to the engineering team right now? Like what are we thinking about the agent kind of going down the road?
I think there's like two places we're looking at the most. One of them is like a GitHub native application. So what this is like it's similar to the workflow, but you also can ping it in any other PR. So let's say you have a PR updating like some API route, you can just highlight the API route like code, say add Netlify, make a new PR to update my docs, or if it's the same like repository, it updates it on that same repository. That's a really cool one. It's the GitHub native like version of the agent. The other one that we're looking forward to also is adding this into the editor experience. I think we think the editor is like the really good thing in the editor, which we can like nail it very well, is just adding it into the editor for agent.
Got it. Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, we only have 5 minutes left. I don't want to keep anyone for no reason, but thank you guys again for showing up. I know we went back and forth on the dates a little bit. We're going to try and do more of these, like keep them really short and then upload them onto YouTube so they're just publicly available to everybody who needs them. But thank you again for showing up. We really appreciate your feedback. Another question from Alice. How did you identify that a code-related PR is requiring a docs change? I think this is in reference to the action, Ethan.
Yeah, it's actually more with how the agent itself works. So I'm gonna let Denzel speak to that because it is beyond my
Yes,
understanding of agentic RAG.
yeah, so right now it kind of doesn't. It just like tries its best and it just like looks around for something relevant. In the future, we want to do like some bucketing logic where we can bucket each PR into like, okay, this is a code change, this is like API reference change, this is like infrastructure change, which probably doesn't need to get documented. And then like after we do bucketing, we would want to have like a draft PR up for like a whole feature. If you do a feature, like it's usually multiple PRs. So you'd have like a feature draft PR that you would like continuously get edited and modified by the agent. So it's like a kind of good starting point for anyone who's like going to be actually like, pulling to the document. It's a good starting point. But right now we don't do any code. We don't like see if it needs doc change.
So the agent's just making an educated guess. Sounds like almost.
Educated guess, yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Awesome. We can stay online for another 2 minutes if anybody has any other questions. If you guys need to leave, obviously feel free to do so. And another one from Sam. Going off of that last question that Alice just asked, I believe, will the agent always make a PR when that workflow is triggered?
We try to make it always make a PR on the actual like, GitHub workflow. You always can edit the prompt with the workflow just because it's via API. But it would try.
Got it. Perfect.
And just for clarification, the GitHub workflow is not tied to the Slack agent. They're both different things.
That makes sense. Awesome. We're here for another 3 minutes if anyone has questions. I already see some people dropping off, so no problem. Just again, very grateful that everyone showed up. We're building all of this for you guys, so the more feedback that we can get, the better we'll make our product. So we're always open to it whenever you have a chance to provide it. Uh, Alice, I can answer this one. Next time, maybe it's helpful to show how to integrate with the N8N workflow. Awesome. Yeah. Ethan, if you're open to it, we could do a video, but Ethan has a really stellar guide on our docs already, and I can share that with you, Alice, in our Slack channel, but gonna let Ethan talk to it or talk about it more because he built
Yeah, so in the
it.
guide that we'll share, it is one of the workflows that's shown there. Um, we don't have a currently like a video demo, but that can also be something to that I can put together so that it's available before our next webinar as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're also talking with N8N right now, trying to get that on the internet marketplace so that it can be an easy like easy install type of situation.
And also recognize Nick's comment there that, or Nicholas, that yes, I also, my preferred use is every week I get the basis for our changelog pull request via the agent.
yep.
Oh, one piece we didn't talk about, it's also pretty cool. It can read any GitHub repository that you get access to, so it can read your code repositories as well as code pull requests. So you can be like, look at this pull request from like our server repository and make edits to this. Um, the only thing you have to do is make sure you configure the GitHub app properly. Nicholas, sadly, this does not work for GitLab, but it does work for GitHub.
Yep. And I missed that comment from Bianca, but she was just talking about how she's really thankful that we dropped the Claude MD file for her, and she just gave some positive feedback. But want to call that out. Another question from Alice: Can we configure the AI to use specific LLM models? I can speak to it, and then Denzel, maybe you can add more like technical complexity behind it. But unfortunately, we cannot, Alice, at the moment. The very high level reason for this is that we have to spend a lot of time with the LLMs to fine tune it with all of the context. And so like bringing your own model adds a ton of like operational complexity that we've tried before and it hasn't worked super well either for us or for our customers. But I can let Denzel add more context if he has it.
Yeah, pretty much what Nacho said. We try to allow people to do custom models for the assistant as well. And typically we get like really big quality drop-offs. we also like try to like use the fact that it's like the currently we're using Cloud Sonnet. So like we try to like use the fact that a few of its features behind it so they can actually like prompt have better like results. And those don't always work with the other custom models, especially two calls.
Mm, awesome. Cool. I know we're at time. Again, thank you for everyone who stuck on till the very end. Really appreciate you guys being here, and we hope the agent brings you as much value as it brings us and our docs team every single day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Sam.